Open the book of Job and watch something that should be impossible. The sons of God come to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser comes with them. He is not sneaking in. He is not hiding. He walks into the throne room of heaven, holds a conversation with God, receives an answer, and leaves. Then a second time, he comes back and does it again. Job belongs to the world of the patriarchs, long after the garden. So if Satan was thrown out of heaven before Eden, what exactly is he doing standing in the throne room of God? Now open the Gospel of Luke. 70 disciples return from a mission, thrilled that even the demons submitted to them. And Jesus answers with one of the strangest sentences in the New Testament. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. He does not say Satan fell before the world began. He says, I saw. And he says it in the middle of his own ministry, in reply to a mission report from ordinary men who had just come back from the villages. Most of us carry one picture in our heads. A rebellion before Genesis. A war in the sky. A proud angel cast down. And then a serpent arriving in the garden already ruined. But the Bible never tells that story in one chapter. It gives us fragments scattered across 1,000 years of writing, a taunt against a Babylonian king, a lament over a king of Tyre, one sentence from Jesus, a war in Revelation, and an accuser who keeps appearing in heaven long after he supposedly lost his place there. So tonight we ask the question that every one of those fragments raises and none of them settles. When did Satan fall? Before Eden, so that the serpent in the garden was already an exile? During the ministry and death of Christ, exactly as Jesus and John seem to describe it? Or at the end of the age, in a war that has not yet happened? 3 readings, all held by serious believers, all with real evidence at full strength. And a name problem that we have to deal with first, because the most famous name in this entire story is not in the Hebrew Bible at all. Here is the first thing that surprises people. The name Lucifer does not appear in the Hebrew scriptures. Not once. The verse everyone quotes is in Isaiah, and the Hebrew phrase there is Helel ben Shakar. Helel means shining one, or bright one. Ben Shakar means son of the dawn. Shining one, son of the dawn. It is a description of the morning star, the last bright light in the sky before sunrise, the one that climbs highest and then vanishes when the true day arrives. When Jerome translated the Bible into Latin in the 4th century, he rendered that phrase with the ordinary Latin word for the morning star. Lucifer, from lux, light, and fere, to carry. Light bearer. It was a translation, not a name. But over the centuries, readers of the Latin Bible began to hear it as a proper name, and when the King James translators carried it into English, the capital letter did the rest. A Hebrew description of a star became the personal name of the devil. Now be careful with what that does and does not prove. It does not mean the passage has nothing to do with Satan. And it certainly does not mean translators were hiding something, because the Latin word simply means what the Hebrew phrase describes. What it means is narrower and more useful. When we ask what the Bible says about Satan's fall, we cannot start by assuming a name that the Hebrew text never uses. We have to read the passages themselves, in their own settings. And their own settings are the second surprise. Isaiah 14 opens by telling us exactly what it is. The prophet says, "You will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon." A taunt song, a victory poem aimed at a specific human tyrant, celebrating the day his empire falls. And the poem is magnificent. The whole earth is at rest and breaks into singing. The cedars of Lebanon rejoice, saying, "Now that you are laid low, no woodcutter comes against us." The grave itself stirs to meet him, and the ghosts of dead kings rise from their thrones to greet the new arrival with the cruelest line in the chapter. "You too have become weak, as we are." And then come the words everyone knows. "How you have fallen from heaven, shining one, son of the dawn. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, I will ascend above the tops of the clouds, I will make myself like the Most High. 5 times I will." And then the answer, "But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit." Read in its own frame, that is a portrait of imperial arrogance. Ancient Near Eastern kings really did claim divine status, really did speak of enthroning themselves on the mountain of the gods, and really did end up in unmarked graves. The passage is a funeral mockery for a man who thought he was a god. That is not a modern skeptical reading. It is what the chapter says about itself in its opening line. Ezekiel 28 does the same thing. The prophet is told to raise a lament concerning the king of Tyre, the ruler of the wealthiest trading city on the Mediterranean coast. And the lament describes him in language that has stopped readers cold for 2,000 years. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you. You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till wickedness was found in you. And then the fall. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. You defiled your sanctuaries by your dishonest trade. I made a fire come out from you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who were watching. 2 chapters. 2 named human kings. 2 poems that describe those kings in language that seems to stretch far past any human being. And that tension is the entire reason this debate exists. Because here is what serious readers have noticed for centuries. The language overshoots the man. No king of Babylon was ever in the garden of God. No merchant prince of Tyre was ever an anointed guardian cherub walking among fiery stones, blameless from the day he was created. Prophetic poetry uses towering imagery, and it is entirely possible to read every line as extravagant metaphor for human pride. But many careful interpreters, ancient and modern, have concluded that the poems reach past their human subjects and describe the pattern of pride itself, and behind that pattern, the being who first embodied it. That reading is old. It appears in Christian writers within a few centuries of the apostles, and it shaped the entire Western imagination of the devil. It is a legitimate theological reading of the canon as a whole. But we must be precise about its status, because precision is what this channel trades in. Isaiah 14 does not name Satan. Ezekiel 28 does not name Satan. Both chapters name a human king in their opening lines. Applying them to the fall of Satan is ancient Christian interpretation, and it may well be right, but it is interpretation and not the explicit statement of the text. Which raises an obvious question. Is there a passage that does explicitly name him? There is exactly one that describes a war and names the loser. And it is the strangest chapter in the last book of the Bible. Revelation 12. A woman clothed with the sun, crowned with 12 stars, crying out in labor. An enormous red dragon waiting in front of her to devour her child the moment it is born. The child is born, snatched up to God and to his throne, and the woman flees into the wilderness. And then, without warning, the scene changes to the sky. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. There is no ambiguity here about who he is. John names him 4 ways in a single sentence: the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, Satan. This is the passage. This is the war. And a loud voice in heaven immediately announces what it means. Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. And then the warning, woe to the earth, because the devil has gone down to you, filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. So we have our war, and we have our loser, named explicitly. What we do not have is a date. And that is where the 3 benches take their seats. The first case is the one most of us grew up with. Satan fell before the garden, in a primordial rebellion, and everything after that is aftermath. Its strongest evidence is simple and hard to argue with. By Genesis 3, the serpent is already opposed to God. Nobody corrupts him inside the story. He arrives corrupted. He arrives with a strategy, a question designed to make God look stingy, and a lie he already knows is a lie. Whatever happened to him happened before the curtain rises on human history. If the fall is a moral event, it is already in the past by the 3rd chapter of the Bible. The New Testament seems to say the same. John writes that the devil has been sinning from the beginning. Jesus says of him, he was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. From the beginning. Twice, from 2 different voices. If you want a text that pushes the fall back to the earliest point, that is it. And this reading gives the two prophetic poems their natural home. If Isaiah's shining one and Ezekiel's guardian cherub describe the being behind the human kings, then his pride, his ambition to enthrone himself above the stars of God, and his expulsion belong to the age before the garden. The picture is coherent: a glorious creature, a proud heart, a fall, and then a serpent in Eden with a grudge older than humanity. But there is a problem, and it is the scene we opened with. If Satan was expelled from heaven before Eden, why is he still walking into it? In Job, the accuser presents himself before the Lord among the sons of God. Not once, but twice. He is questioned. He answers. He is given permission and limits. He leaves and returns. In Zechariah, the prophet sees the high priest Joshua standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan is standing at his right side to accuse him. Standing right there, in a vision of the heavenly court, doing exactly what his title says he does. Accuser is not a nickname, it is a job description, and in these passages he is still performing it in the presence of God. That is difficult for a reading in which he was thrown out of heaven before the garden. And notice how Revelation 12 describes the effect of the war. The accuser of our brothers, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. That verse assumes he was accusing before God until the moment he was thrown out. Which sounds a great deal like the accuser we meet in Job and Zechariah, and not like a being who lost his access before human history began. Bench 1 has a reply, and it is a real one. Fall may not mean the same thing as expulsion. A being can lose his standing morally, becoming God's enemy in character, long before he loses his access legally, as a prosecutor loses the right to appear in court. On that view, Genesis 3 shows us a fallen creature, while Job shows us a creature who has not yet been evicted. That distinction is coherent, and many careful readers hold it. But notice what it concedes. It means the moral fall and the casting down are two different events at two different times. Which is the door the second bench walks through? The second case says the decisive fall happened inside the Gospels. Start with the sentence we began with. The 70 return, rejoicing that the demons submit in Jesus' name, and he replies, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Read it in its moment. The disciples report a victory in the villages, and Jesus describes something he has seen, a collapse from heaven, sudden as lightning. He is not correcting them by pointing to the distant past. He is telling them what their small mission is part of. Then John's Gospel, days before the crucifixion. Jesus says, Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be driven out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. Not once upon a time. He fixes the eviction of the ruler of this world to the hour of his own death, and the Gospel writer tells us explicitly that being lifted up refers to the kind of death he was going to die. And now go back to Revelation 12 and read the sequence again, because this is the strongest move Bench 2 has. The war in heaven does not come out of nowhere. It follows the birth of the child who is snatched up to God and to his throne. A male child who will rule the nations, caught up to the throne of God. For a great many interpreters, ancient and modern, that is unmistakably the life, death, and ascension of Christ. And it is immediately after that ascension that Michael and his angels fight. The dragon loses his place, and heaven announces that the kingdom of God and the authority of his Messiah have come. On this reading, everything clicks into place. The accuser really does have access in Job and Zechariah, because the case against humanity is still open. Then the Messiah lives, dies, rises, and ascends, and the case collapses. The prosecutor is disbarred. Heaven announces the reason in the very next breath. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And the earth is warned that he has come down furious, because he knows his time is short, which is exactly the posture of a defeated enemy in the age between the cross and the end. The cross-examination is fair, and it has two parts. First, Luke's sentence is genuinely debated in the original. The tense allows more than one reading, and it is possible that Jesus is describing something he witnessed long before, not something happening in that hour. Careful interpreters have taken it both ways, and the grammar alone does not decide it. Second, Revelation 12 sits inside a book of visions that are not obviously in chronological order, and the chapter itself sweeps from a woman in labor to a dragon in the sky to a wilderness flight measured in days. Reading its war as a time-stamped event in the 1st century requires a set of assumptions about how apocalyptic literature works, and not everyone shares them. Bench 2's case is strong, but it is built on a chain of interpretive links, and every link can be questioned. Which brings us to the third case. The war has not happened yet. Its argument is structural. Revelation 12 appears in the middle of a book that is largely concerned with what is still to come, positioned among trumpets and bowls and final judgments. If the surrounding material describes the end of the age, the most natural reading is that the war does too. On this view, the dragon's expulsion is a future event, and the Great Tribulation follows it, which is exactly what the chapter says. He has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows his time is short. And this reading takes seriously something the other two can rush past. The Bible clearly describes more than one act in this drama. In Revelation 20, long after the war of chapter 12, an angel comes down with the key to the abyss and a great chain, seizes the dragon, and binds him. If the casting down had already ended his freedom, there would be nothing left to bind. There are stages. Something is still outstanding. The cross-examination here is equally fair. Revelation 12 links its war to the child caught up to the throne, and it is difficult to read that child as anything other than the Messiah who has already come. A future war introduced by a past ascension is possible, but it requires the vision to jump across 2,000 years inside a single scene. And the reading has to account for Jesus' own words in the Gospels, spoken in the present tense, about a ruler being driven out now. So let me put a fourth door on the table, offered honestly, because a great many careful readers end up walking through it. What if the answer is not one date, but a sequence? Consider how the evidence lines up if the fall is progressive. A moral fall before the garden, which is why the serpent arrives already corrupt and why Jesus can say he was a murderer from the beginning. A judicial fall at the cross, when the accuser's case collapses and he loses his standing to prosecute, which is why Jesus can say the ruler of this world is driven out now and why heaven celebrates the blood of the Lamb as the reason. And a final fall still ahead, when he is seized, bound, and ended for good. On that reading, every text keeps its plain meaning and none has to be forced. Genesis 3, Job, Luke, John, Revelation 12, and Revelation 20 are not competing accounts of one moment. They are stages of one long defeat. And that is not a compromise invented to make everyone comfortable. It is the pattern the Bible uses constantly. A victory won decisively, applied progressively, and completed finally. So here is our verdict, and as always it comes in categories rather than a single winner, because that is what the evidence actually supports. On the moral origin of evil, Bench 1 holds the ground. Something went wrong before Genesis 3, and the New Testament says so plainly with its from the beginning language. Nobody corrupts the serpent inside the story. On the explicit war text, Bench 2 has the strongest sequence. Revelation 12 is the only passage that names the loser without ambiguity, and it places its war immediately after a child is caught up to the throne of God, with heaven announcing the blood of the Lamb as the reason for the victory. Whatever else is true, that connection is in the text and not imported into it. On what remains outstanding, Bench 3 is simply correct. The dragon is not finished. Revelation 20 still has a chain in its hand, and the New Testament everywhere assumes an enemy who is defeated but not yet removed. And what none of the three can honestly claim is a date. The Bible never gives us one. It gives us a rebellion whose beginning is assumed rather than narrated, a victory it dates to a cross, and an ending it promises but has not yet delivered. If you wanted a chapter that says here is the year it happened, it does not exist, and any teacher who tells you otherwise is filling in a blank that Scripture deliberately left open. Which brings me to the part of this that actually touches your week, because there is one line in Revelation 12 that most people read straight past, and it may be the most practical sentence in the chapter. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony. Notice what is not on that list. Not by superior spiritual technique. Not by knowing the correct chronology of his fall. Not by being impressive. The two weapons named are something done for them, and something they said. That is the whole arsenal. And notice what he is called. Not the destroyer, not the tempter, though he is both elsewhere. Here he is the accuser, who accuses them before our God day and night. Which tells you what his primary work against you actually is. It is not usually a haunted house. It is a voice with a list. It sounds like your own thinking. It uses true information about your worst days, and it always ends in the same place. You are disqualified. Do not bother approaching God. The reason that voice has lost its legal force is not that you finally out-argued it. It is that the case was closed by someone else's blood, and the prosecutor was thrown out of court. That is why heaven's announcement in this chapter is not a battle report but a verdict. And if someone you love is living under that voice right now, convinced their record has disqualified them, send them this video. It takes 2 seconds, and the difference between an accuser withstanding and an accuser without any is the difference between a life in fear and a life in the open. And there is one more question this investigation opens, which we will take up next, because Revelation 12 mentions something in passing that ought to stop you cold. When the dragon is hurled down, the text says his angels were hurled down with him. His angels. He did not fall alone. 1/3 of the stars of heaven, the chapter says, were swept down by his tail. So who are they? Are they the same beings as the demons the disciples encountered in the villages? Are they the same as the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, whom Jude says are kept in chains in darkness for judgment? Are they the spirits of the giants from the older tradition this channel has already investigated? The New Testament shows us at least 3 groups of hostile spiritual beings, and it never sits us down and explains how they relate. Some are free and active. Some are already imprisoned. And some, according to Jude, are being held for a day that has not come. That is the next file, the ones who fell with him. Follow the channel and turn on notifications, because that investigation goes straight back into the territory this page was built on. And before you go, give me your verdict on tonight's trial. Before Eden, at the cross, or still ahead of us. And tell me which piece of evidence actually moved you. The accuser walking into the throne room in Job, the lightning Jesus said he watched fall, or the chain that is still waiting in Revelation 20. I read every comment.